Track 3, Chapter 3. Fight Against FGM. Historical Perspective and Present Scenario. In the present era, we are witnessing the realization of our goal, namely the abandonment of FGM, a matter that has received enormous attention across the globe. However, the issue is not merely the realization of the goal, but also ensuring that it has productive outcomes. This chapter puts the fight against FGM in a historical perspective and looks at where we are today. It elaborates on the international laws against the practice and their weaknesses, and looks at discussions on FGM with prominent Muslim clerics, along with many fatwas on the public. Eventually, we discuss the role of the major actors who can play a vital role in discontinuing the practice, including the responsibilities and obligations of the Iranian government. Historical overview of the fight against FGM. Efforts to combat FGM began in Africa in the early 20th century based on the available documentation, although it is possible that the undocumented history of this struggle by the local people is older than this. With the arrival of the European colonial administrators and Western missionaries in Africa, a debate about banning female circumcision rapidly came to the fore. They objected to the practice on the grounds that it violates Christian principles and behaviors, but their efforts to eliminate it did not produce any result. Soon after the end of the colonial era, many laws which attempted to stop FGM emerged, but these laws quickly faded away as they were based on ineffective information and inconsistent efforts. In 1929, in Kenya, a missionary council began referring to female circumcision as female genital mutilation. In this regard, the name of Hulda Stumpf is of eminent importance. An American missionary and strong opponent of FGM, she was murdered after being circumcised by her killer, according to some accounts. 1996. In the 1960s and 70s, many women groups raised their voices against FGM through massive campaigns and rallies. It was also when medical professionals started to mobilize opinion through articles in medical journals. These were based on personal observations of the clinical complications female victims of FGM encountered. In 1979, the first global seminar on the subject was sponsored by the WHO. It focused on the findings of an American journalist, Hormozgan, who had researched the subject in Africa. She talked of the need to stop all forms of these harmful traditional practices, but her efforts encountered rejection and the issue remained unsolved. However, the event did give an international platform to the issue of FGM. Since then, there have been worldwide endeavors to convince experts to abandon it, which culminated in the recognition of FGM as a human rights violation by the United Nations General Assembly in 2012. Initially, the campaign mainly focused on the physical harm caused by the cutting of body parts. However, in the 1980s, FGM started to be viewed as a human rights violation, and the need for a gender lens with respect to the laws and human rights felt mandatory. During the 1990s, the emergence of the themes of women's rights as human rights and the prevention of violence against women gave this campaign international recognition, which helped many countries to outlaw the practice. This decade saw many international conferences address the human rights aspect of FGM. The World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna in 1993, the International Conference on Population and Development, ICPD, in Cairo in 1995, and the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, Beijing Conference, in 1995, are especially prominent. Finally, in 2012, the UN General Assembly voted to recognize FGM as a human rights violation. On the page 82, we have a picture, United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women. In addition to the international efforts African women have also made innumerable efforts to abolish FGM. They continued with their struggle even after the failure of the WHO conference, and in 1984, an Inter-African Committee on Traditional Rituals Affecting Women's Health was formed in Dakar, Senegal. It now operates in 26 African countries to educate national governments and common people about the evils of FGM. The African women's struggle proved immensely productive, and in February 2003, the IAC conference in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, declared 6 February as the day of zero tolerance to FGM. The following year, UNICEF's Innocent Research Center published a seminal report entitled Changing a Harmful Social Convention, Female Genital Mutilation, or Cutting. In recent years, efforts against FGM have focused more on raising awareness through information, education and communication campaigns. Artistic methods such as music, theater, and film are used in an abundance to reach the masses. In addition, the health sector, legal, and human rights organizations are very productive and have included information on FGM in training programs and women's rights for the lawyers, judges, and society at large. One of the most significant recent events is when the UK government and UNICEF jointly organized the first International Girls Summit Conference in UK in July 2014, RCW 2014, predominantly focused on child marriage and FGM. It brought together officials from the affected countries and high-income countries, community leaders, civil society, the private sector, and figures from the media. The conference aimed to mobilize political will, ensure governments and communities commit to ending FGM, and make sure efforts against FGM were adequately funded. One of the highlights was an affirmation to end the sense of social obligation to practice FGM. The conference ended with a commitment by 21 countries to be a part of the global movement to end this practice. The UK government's Department for International Development, DFID, agreed to form a team to follow up on commitments made during the conference. The Toastem project in Africa is also using innovative indirect approaches to spread awareness of the health consequences of FGM. It has designed a community empowerment program which engages local people to build on their own ideas for bringing about change. Toastem 2015. The methodological framework includes classroom sessions on rights to health and freedom from violence. Their work has led to a public declaration to abandon FGM from over 7,200 communities in Djibouti, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Mauritania, Senegal, Somalia, and the Gambia. However, according to Toastem, although public declarations are critical in the process for total abandonment and necessary for building critical mass, eventually leading FGM to becoming a thing of the past, it's not 100% success. International laws, with the gradual recognition of FGM as a violation of human rights, a worldwide campaign started to draft and implement laws against it. Many countries are committed to protecting the rights of women and children and have ratified a number of international and regional treaties that address various forms of discrimination and violence. For example, approximately 17 out of 28 FGM practicing countries in Africa have laws that specifically prohibit FGM, including Burkina Faso, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Djibouti, Guinea, Togo, Tanzania, Kenya, the Central African Republic, and Egypt. In addition, Senegal, Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia took an extra step and incorporated FGM as a crime in their penal code. Most countries receiving immigrants from FGM practicing countries have also passed specific legislation on FGM-FGC. Some European countries, like the UK, Sweden, Norway, and Belgium, have chosen to enact specific laws to criminalize the practice, yet others, such as France, have addressed FGMC under general criminal law provisions. In 2011, the Spanish government initiated efforts against immigrant families taking their daughters to their country of origin for FGM. In early 2015, Spanish medical specialists proposed setting up examinations and getting immigrant families to sign declarations not to put daughters through FGM. The weakness of laws against FGM in the Middle East and in Iran. The president-head of Iranian Association of Social Workers shared, although female circumcision is not rooted in ancient Iranian customs, yet we witness that such crimes are committed against Iranian girls in some villages and remote parts of the country. According to Jahan's social report, based on the published statistics of the UN, this crime is committed on 6,000 girls in Arabic, African, and some Asian countries each day, and has around 2 million victims each year. Based on the same report, this operation is also carried out in some villages of Iran to explicitly decrease a girl's sexual stimulation. However, the president-head of the Iranian Association of Social Workers said that girl circumcision is very rare in Iran and can only be seen in a few villages with population less than 2,000. He also told Jahan's reporter, this operation is done mostly in African countries. Neighboring countries also practice it to some extent, but its center is in African countries. Since the practice of FGM-FGC is centuries old and so embedded in the culture and norms of the communities practicing it, it can be difficult for new laws criminalizing FGM and even the incorporation of measures against FGM into penal codes and existing laws to bear fruit. With FGM being a taboo subject in the Middle East, there was no official acceptance of the practice's existence, so enforcing a law against something which does not officially exist is out of the question. Nevertheless, there have been some government actions against FGM. For example, Iraq has enacted a law to tackle FGM, especially in the south of Iraqi Kurdistan, but the results have been minimal at the beginning and now get better. Similarly, Egypt still has high rates of FGM, and there is little action against the practitioners. However, the Arab Spring has provided some opportunities to give FGM a higher profile. In the case of Iran, taking action against FGM is even harder because there is a lack of support from the government and the lack of organized NGO groups. Indeed, Iran refused to ratify the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. During the tenure of President Mohammad Khatami, the Iranian parliament passed a bill in favor of joining CEDAW, but it was voted by Iranian Powerful Guardian Council on the basis that it contradicts Islamic principles. Nevertheless, Iran has laws which can be used to persecute and punish mutilation of the body. Here we can mention the Women's Responsibilities and Entitlement Charters and entitlement charters on the right to life, physical integrity, protection against victimization, the right to mental and physical health, and protection against family violence. Nonetheless, since the most of the above-mentioned laws are patchily enforced, it is hard to find successful claims made by victims of FGM. The laws of Iran does not protect women from FGM. Alavi, 2015. The laws mean that FGM is carried out in people's houses by midwives and not by medical practitioners. Alavi, 2015. The secretive nature of FGM is increasing the health risks to women. The lack of information, coupled with the government's denial of existence of FGM, make it difficult for the issues of FGM to catch the attention of the relevant ministries. On the page 87, there is a photo. It is called A Village in Marivan. It is taken by Kameel Ahmady. It's a picture of a rural alleyway. 4 school kids can be seen in the picture. Iran has incorporated some general anti-mutilation laws in its penal code, and according to Article 479 and the Article 663 of the Islamic Penal Code, qisas can be invoked when there is cutting of female genital organs. Mutilated persons can also look to the Iranian protection law for people with disabilities, which was enacted in 2003, and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which became law in 2007. In addition, Iran has ratified the Convention on the Right of the Child, CRC. Article 2, Paragraph 2 of the Convention states that states parties shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that the child is protected against all forms of discrimination or punishment on the basis of the status, activities, expressed opinions, or beliefs of the child's parents, legal guardians, or family members. Article 24 of the CRC puts emphasis on the health of child, which could be violated in the event FGM was carried out on the child. According to Ms. Shirin Talenda, a lawyer from island of Kesh, which has the highest rate of FGM in Iran, that the Iranian penal system features broad and general provisions that prohibit bodily mutilation, according to Article 479 of Islamic Penal Code, passed in 1991, and Article 663 and Article 664 of the same penal code, passed in 2013. Female genital mutilation is punishable by the payment of blood money. According to Article 12 of the Iranian Constitution, it seems that the purpose of the legislator was enactment of a general rule. Based on Article 12 of the Iranian Constitution, Shia Islam, which follows the Jafari school of Islamic jurisprudence, it is official state religious, although the followers of other branches of Islam, such as Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali, and Zaidi, are free to adhere to their own religious ceremonies and obligations. That would mean that if FGM were considered a religious duty, no female victim would be able to claim compensation in court. However, according to Article 21, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution, the government must ensure the rights of women in all respects. The overall picture is thus a somewhat confusing one, and the Iranian Civil Code does not help as it does not address FGM. Mr. Mansour Eskandari in Tehran is a lawyer, attorney at law, who believes and recommends that according to the Iranian laws, another law under which FGM-FGC affected people might seek redress is the law of the protection of the rights of children and adolescents passed in 2003. According to Article 1, types of child abuse leading to physical, mental, or moral harm are prohibited. In the same vein, Article 4 states, any intentional abuse of children or ignoring their mental and physical health, as well as forcing them to leave school, is prohibited, and the wrongdoer would be sentenced to 3 to 6 months imprisonment or a fine of 10 million riyals. While Article 5 classifies child abuse as a criminal offense, so eliminating the need for a civil complaint in FGM cases. To understand what might be possible under these provisions, we need to review of FGM through the prism of Sharia obligations. Under the Sharia, time is of the essence. If the female genital cutting is necessary, it must be done when it is practical. Where it is not practical, it must be prevented, which does not entail any violation of Islamic obligations. Although Islamic Penal Code does not criminalize female genital mutilation cutting, the affected person could file a lawsuit using Article 21, 22, and 34 of the Iranian Constitution. According to Article 3 of the Civil Code, the judges could not refuse to hear the case on the pretext of silent rules, as well as vague statutes, conflict of rules, and too broad rules. The question comes to mind is that who can file a lawsuit where children are the victims of FGM? As we have already mentioned, Article 5 of the law on the protection of the rights of children and adolescents make it possible for the Attorney General to pursue cases. According to Article 66 of the criminal law, passed in 2014, NGOs whose statutes explicitly state that their duties involve the protection of children, adolescents, and women can file lawsuits against offenders. Furthermore, Note 2 of the same criminal code states that the judicial authorities are obligated to make victims aware of the existence of such organizations. In the final analysis, It should be asked whether parents have the right to put their child through FGMC. It seems that the answer to the question is no. Sharia and parental responsibility laws make clear that the parents do not own their child but are guardians. To illustrate this further, we could cite Article 158 of the Islamic Penal Code, which stipulates the actions of the parents and guardians of children to protect and discipline them are not punishable, but the same actions are punishable if the child would not be referred to as a child anymore. We suggested that a new law should be passed to protect girls. Female genital mutilation, or cutting, for puberty should be done only with the permission of the coroner, and after puberty, the individual would be considered capable of making a decision independently. It is clear that stronger laws can bring about a slight reduction in FGM, but not in its elimination. In order to eliminate FGM, it would require long-term commitment on behalf of communities, particularly the influential elites, clerics, bibis, and law providers, plus the regional and central governments. Major contributing factors. Ending FGM requires the joint efforts of activists and victims. But who are the main parties involved? Countries that have succeeded in lowering the rate of female genital mutilation, like Senegal, have used varied methods. Alternative rites of passage into womanhood, campaigns in which brides and bridegrooms state that they both reject the custom, and the involvement of clerics and priests. The practice originated as one form of control over the fidelity of women, particularly when men were away for a long time. Salam and De Waal linked this to social acceptance of women by their communities and societies. The following passage will provide an overview of the role played by society and other major actors in igniting FGM. Often it is governments that violate the human rights of citizens. Similarly, the implementation of many human rights is not possible without the support of government concerned. However, patriarchal culture and norms often prevail, where the government is trying to do something specially in the context of women's and children's rights, as ongoing FGM in Iran and Egypt shows. Despite the government's efforts to ban it, and despite many fatwas about the forbidden status of the practice in Islam, FGM is still flourishing. In addition to the patriarchy, the political structure and system are equally responsible for this. The mutilations are performed without any direct involvement of men. It appears that a large majority of men in Kurdish and southern areas of Iran are at least aware of the practice. This disconnection of males seems to apply to other women's issues as well. Many studies confirm that men have no knowledge of the reproductive health of the female. In most of the societies we are focusing on, it is considered to be women's issue or secret, and men have no say in it. But men may be influenced by clerics and imams who preach about the practice as having diverse benefits and connections with religion. It is interesting to discuss the attitudes of some of the women who have undergone FGM. According to them, those who are not circumcised are not a full woman. For them, FGM is something that needs to be done to bring dignity to both women and girls and to preserve their chastity. These women do not question FGM as they consider it an old tradition. Importantly, FGM is mostly done when a girl is too young to have any say in the matter. The practice is perpetuated when women put their daughters through FGM, as they consider this mandatory for getting married. On the page 92, we have a picture. It is called Women Discussing FGM, Kermanshah. It is taken by Kameel Ahmady. As the title stated, it's a picture of a few women gathered around and talking about FGM. More on the male perspective. On the page 93, we have a picture. It is called Wedding in Hormozgan, Kurdistan. It is taken by Kameel Ahmady. It's a picture of a wedding. There are many women and men gathered around in colorful clothing. Although FGM is something that happens within the female realm, the role of men cannot be overlooked. Some men can cover behind religion and see any endeavor to end FGM as a Western idea and women's liberation. In addition, FGM may give men more pleasure because of the tighter vaginal opening, and in the most conservative FGM practicing societies, men refuse to marry an uncut girl. Some Iranian men from practicing communities believe that FGM controls women's sexual drive and may say their community is much purer, with fewer moral problems compared with Shia Persian or Turkish communities. A common argument used by men in the Sunni population studied is the following: if their women were not circumcised, they would not be able to control them, which could result in behaviors similar to their Shia counterparts or women in sexually oriented TV programs or films. During our study, some men shared that they had sexual intercourse with uncircumcised women from other parts of Iran. They stated circumcised women's genitals are much smoother, smaller in shape, and enjoyable for sex. However, they also claimed that uncut women were better for foreplay. A few of the male interviewees had no knowledge of FGM or whether their wife had been cut. Interestingly, once we informed them of the dangers of FGM and its negative impact on women's sexual enjoyment, for example, that they cannot enjoy sex with their husbands due to the fact that their clitoris have been partially or fully cut, therefore they can't be fully aroused. Most confirmed this was the case in their sexual relations with their wives and said that their women were not hot or do not give us pleasure. They also admitted that to feed their sexual desire they had other sexual partners or simply married a younger second wife. Later, they were asked whether, in the light of their new knowledge of FGM, they would be willing to have their own daughters cut and therefore suffer the same agony and perhaps cheated on by their husband. Our interviewees could not answer and instead remained silent and looked away. Religion, an opponent of FGM or its defender. In Iran and many other Muslim countries, FGM is mostly justified the four Sunni Islamic schools of jurisprudence and their views on circumcision. Hanafi and Maliki schools. Circumcision is inherent to human nature, but not obligatory. It is recommended for men, but for women, although it is better to be done, is not recommended. Ibn Jazi, Al-Bahi, Ibn al-Jalab. Hanbali school. Circumcision is obligatory for men, but for women, there are two hadith. According to the stronger one, it is recommended, but according to the other, it is obligatory for women as well as men. Ibn Qadameh, Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Mardawai. Shafi school. As with the Hanbali school, circumcision for men is obligatory, but for women, there are two hadith. The more authentic implies obligation of female circumcision. The second, which was weak when issued, is confirmed by most of Shafi scholars now. According to this one, circumcision is recommended for women. According to hadith, which declares female circumcision is obligatory, the procedure should be to cut a small piece of clitoris, just symbolically, minimally, not to mutilate the organ. And at the end of the saying it is added, the less you cut clitoris, the better. The second hadith starts with the term kila that implies a weak statement, but as it has been confirmed and recited by most scholars, to some extent, it became stronger. Tawfa, Ibn al-Hajj, Volume 9, p. 198, 199, 198, 199. With religious arguments, we are alluded to in earlier chapters. A campaign to challenge FGM by an NGO in Sudan in 1998 faced strong opposition by Islamic clerics who advised the Muslim community to resist Western pressure and stick to tradition norms. Similarly, imams in Sulaymaniyah, in Iraqi Kurdistan, labeled those who believe that female circumcision is not an Islamic practice as ignorant. It is worth stating that majority of the Muslim world does not practice or have full knowledge of the existence of FGM. Therefore, there has been no response from the non-Shafi Muslim world after FGM started to be covered by the international media. FGM is not a religious obligation. Indeed, the practice conflicts with numerous aspects of Islam. Nonetheless, an ordinary person with limited knowledge somehow relates it to their faith, while strict Shafi Muslims consider FGM as a way of life and fervently support it. During the time of Prophet Muhammad, many tribes were practicing it as a tradition. Therefore, FGM was with them for some time before Islam, and it is clear that female circumcision was not introduced by Prophet Muhammad. Sarah Ali clarifies in her book A Woman Under Threat that Quran, as a text providing mainly general guidelines with some injunctions or laws spelled out specifically, does not address the issue of circumcision of either males or females. The Quran does, however, refer to sexual relationship in marriage as one of mutual satisfaction that is considered a mercy from Allah. There is a picture. It is called Hormuz Island. It is taken by Kameel Ahmady. In the picture, there are 3 females. The Quran clearly indicates the significance of husband and wife to derive pleasure from each other. It is lawful for you to go in onto your wives during the night, preceding the day's fast. They are as the garment for you, and you are as the garment for them. 2:187. And he has put love and mercy between you. 30:21. Clearly, any act that interferes with fulfilling a sexual relationship contradicts the essence of Islam. According to Fiqh al-Najai, a book of jurisprudence, the power of men and women to have sexual intercourse and taking pleasure is a gift endowed by God to human beings. This power is one of the strongest instinctive abilities in animals. According to Islam laws, the power to enjoy sexual intercourse is one of the definitive goals. Therefore, it belongs to the basic rights of every human being. The FGM FAQ, published by the UK-based Foundation for Women's Health Research and Development, indicates that although the Quran mentions many duties regarding women, such as pregnancy, breastfeeding, divorce, menstruation, etc., it says nothing about FGM. The Quran teaches that in God's creation, everything is complete. God does not create anything with fault. FGM can be seen as an intrusion by man for the deformation of God's perfect creation, subjugating women to deprive her of pleasure and the right which God has given her as a human. Some people attempt to justify FGM using the saying hadith as the Prophet Muhammad. Several hadiths which have been interpreted as supporting FGM. One, known as the hadith of circumcision, is often told thus: Muhammad met a woman called Atiyah. This woman was known to be a circumciser of female slaves. Muhammad said this to her: trim, but do not cut into it, for this is brighter for the face and more favorable with the husband. There is a picture. It is called Wedding in South of Iran, photo by S.H. Talande. There's a photo on page 99. It is a picture of some boys and men standing together, playing some kind of drums. This saying is ambiguous and has been used by both supporters of FGM and those against it. For supporters, it is a matter of great relief that FGM is not forbidden. For opponents of FGM, the Prophet has advised keeping cutting to a minimum, which in practice must mean doing no harm at all. The life of Prophet Muhammad was a real depiction of the teaching of Quran. Since the Quran does not discuss female circumcision, the reliability of this hadith was also suspect, and Abu Dawud, a compiler of hadiths, himself classifies it as a weak. His is the only one of the 6 classic hadith collections to contain it are unauthentic. There is much debate on the issue, and many Muslim scholars have provided evidence for both and against FGM. In 2006, a conference held in Egypt at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, attended by eminent religious scholars, conducted that FGM should be banned as it is outside Islam. Professor Ali Goma, then the Grand Mufti of Egypt, told the conference that FGM harms women psychologically and physically. Therefore, The practice must be stopped in support of one of the highest values of Islam, namely, to do not harm to one another. In accordance with the commandment of the Prophet Muhammad, accept no harm and do no harm to another. Moreover, this is seen as punishable aggression against humankind. Fatwa on FGM in Kurdish, Iraq English translation, with regard to ruling about FGM in Islamic jurisprudence, and also what is the view of Higher Committee for Fatwa with regard to this issue. The Kurdish High Committee for Fatwa in Kurdistan responds as follows. In fact, Islam did not introduce FGM, but it is an old traditional practice that was prevalent among ancient people. The famous ancient Greek historian, Herodotus, says those who carried out FGM in ancient times were the Egyptians, Assyrians, Cushidians, and Ethiopians. Other people learned the practice from Egyptians. A former sheikh of Al-Azhar says the practice of FGM is an ancient one. Many people did that. Since the start of history, they continued doing so, even until the appearance of Islam. In 2010, the Higher Committee of Fatwa in Iraqi Kurdistan issued a fatwa on FGM. Its stance was that FGM predates Islam, and so it denied any link with Islam. However, it also mentioned that FGM is sunnah and there is no punishment for those who practice it. This fatwa was poorly received by FGM opponents, of course, whereas the Al-Azhar Conference left no room for the practice of FGM and provided firm ground for ending it. The Fatwa Committee had basically created a loophole for it to continue.